Hi, it's Louisa Dahl, and welcome to the Interactive Minds podcast, where I talk with passionate marketers, innovators, and digital leaders about their specific recipes for success. In today's show, I interview Chris Sonn from Virgin Money talking about their needs-based content approach. Here's 3 things you're going to learn. 1, Chris's prioritization tips and his rare approach to email. 2, how to get cut through by aligning content to your company values. And 3, why your organic search focus needs to come back to intent. Let's get into it. Today I'm here with Chris Sonn, who is the Senior Manager of Digital Marketing at Virgin Money. Chris has been in the marketing space for over 15 years and currently leads the digital marketing team on stitching media, experience, content and conversion to drive long-term growth. Chris has spoken at Interactive Minds events in the past, sharing some of his knowledge around voice and SEO. It's great now to have you on the Interactive Minds podcast. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into hearing some more about your work today, Chris. And during your time in the marketing industry, I know you've worked across agency, startups and client side. Tell us a little bit about your career to date and a few highlights.
Yeah, well, I guess I've been lucky enough, to start with sort of studying for marketing, which got me into some early stages marketing roles, but very quickly identified that there was a great opportunity tapping into more of the digital side of the equation. And I guess one of the pivotal moments for me was when I was working for AXA and got exposure to actually basically developing a web presence and an online form that would sell insurance while I was back in Ireland.
Awesome.
That really got me into this whole digital marketing thing. And then off the back of that, I just got curious about what it's like to work in all sorts of different sizes of businesses as well as types of businesses, hence my time in agency, hence why I will have tried startups sort of in the fintech space as well as large corporates and anywhere in the middle.
Great.
To sit where I am now.
Yeah, perfect. Tell us a little bit about your current role.
Well, so currently I'm basically doing the digital marketing for Virgin Money, encompassing essentially all the products that we sell. And the best way to describe digital marketing for Virgin Money is we kind of play this sort of connection role between data, digital assets, and media, and really making the 3 sort of work as efficiently as possible together.
Excellent. And how long have you been at Virgin Money now?
I will be, nearly 2 years.
Excellent. Great. Can you tell us a little bit about how it's structured at Virgin Money? Where does digital marketing sit within the team?
So the structure, essentially, digital marketing would sit under a marketing umbrella. So we will have a chief marketing officer looking after marketing for Virgin Money, as well as Bank of Queensland Retail Banking, being part of the group of Bank of Queensland.
Yep.
And digital marketing will then be working, it's a very cross-functional team. So we are essentially 2 people doing digital marketing, but working very collaboratively with essentially the actual marketing managers running the specific products we sell.
Yeah.
Working with the CX team, working with a analytics team. They call themselves CIA. And then we'll have a digital team that will sit outside of marketing, so under a digital umbrella, but we work very closely with them because they'll own the actual digital assets, such as website.
Yep. Excellent. And how many different products are there that you're marketing?
So currently we will have 7 products in market, which we obviously cover all of them. Obviously they have varying degrees of importance to the business. But yes, so we're basically covering all the suites of insurances. We do superannuation, as well as usually what people know us for, which is credit cards.
Yeah, great. And look, it sounds like you've got a fairly small team working across quite a broad remit. How do you organise your time and priorities?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting challenge because there's always so much opportunity in that sort of space when we're trying to connect data to improve our media efficiency or how we use data to improve someone's experience using personalization, or how we can improve, conversion rates just for sheer acquisition.
Yes.
So there's just a lot on, and being it such a cross-functional team, it basically, the way I look at it is I'll always have a matrix on a wall where I'll have essentially a scale on how much impact will it have for the business. And then the usual typical scale you'll have is that you're comparing impact to how easy it is to roll out. That's your typical matrix.
Yep.
I've shifted that a bit to be how much control do we have over that particular initiative?
Awesome.
The idea being that if there's too many dependencies with other teams or even external partners, then it's going to be a slower process to get it up and running. So typically we will prioritize what we know will have a high impact and that we have a high level of control over.
Ah, great. Well,
and that helps with the prioritization.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I like that. That's a new one that I haven't heard someone share before. So thank you. That's a great insight. What does a typical day look like for you?
I've been always enjoying sort of reading what makes someone more productive and someone who enjoys going to work every day. And there was an interesting tip I'd read a while back, which was that you never start your day by just opening up your email and seeing what landed overnight. And it's always better practice to plan your day, then potentially open your email if you consider that to be an important thing to do in the morning.
Yes, love it.
But to never start with that. So I tend to stick to that. I'll think about essentially the few, like 2 or 3 things I want to deliver over the course of the day, and I commit to doing that. I generally will have to look at email. If anything, we are in finance, and email is still a big part of how you communicate across teams and across partners, whether internal or external. And then after that, yes, typically I'll be using my calendar, for example, to sort of lock out time to commit to doing some work as opposed to just responding to email and going to meetings.
Yep.
So generally my calendar looks always chock-a-block, but it's only because I've got sort of half days allocated to certain things, and then other days will have actual more meetings with a number of people in the business.
Awesome. So you're allocating time for tasks within your calendar?
Yes.
Yeah, great.
Yes, I found that to be a great way to not only not get taken over by too many meetings,
yes,
also makes it easier to say no to someone if they want to meet with you, but it's not a high priority and it would stop you from delivering something that you have to do for the week.
Yeah.
So it's I found that to be quite helpful.
Fantastic. And I love what you say about not checking emails. It's something that's really easy to say, but it's also really easy to click on a little email icon and just have a quick look. How do you have the discipline and what are your techniques to kind of making sure that you do the thinking before you check?
Well, basically, I don't turn on the computer or won't turn on the screen of the computer until I've had a thought about what I want to do for the day.
Yeah.
That definitely helps.
And no work emails on your phone then?
The computer will have like the notifications turned off, so it's not like I had this sort of pesky badge telling me that I've got 63 unread emails, which sort of can create email anxiety.
Yes.
It will make no sound if something comes in. I do have emails on the phone, but I apply the same method of turning off notifications and anything like that. So it's only when I want to go to see email, I will, as opposed to be triggered to do it.
Yeah, great. And do you have a similar type of discipline throughout the day, or do you kind of check them in between bits and pieces?
I guess the typical routine, although I can't say it's necessarily a routine beyond the morning one, is I'll be checking email in the morning and making sure that if there's anything urgent, that I can sort of tick the box or at least ask the relevant questions or make something progress. I'll generally ignore emails most of the time until I get closer to lunchtime, where I'll have another run of what's worth reading, what's worth deleting, and then probably towards late afternoon, I'll do a final scan of what's in there before shutting down for the day.
Fantastic. Excellent. I love that discipline. It's actually quite rare to hear someone who has that discipline for their day, and I imagine it probably helps with your focus and your productivity. So that's really exciting to hear and great to be able to share.
Well, I've always said that I hated email, and I always say that in workplaces I'm at, and I'm always keen to try to new things that can remove the need for email. So if you have reports that are scheduled weekly, or if you have updates that you need to make, can you make the updates somewhere that everyone can access at any time? Can reports be scheduled so that you don't have to send them or read emails or all that kind of stuff? So I've always been keen to promote that.
Yeah.
But I'm conscious we're still stuck with having to use email and to probably receive still too many of them. So yes, it kind of helps to have that routine.
Yes. And do you use any other tools like Slack or anything else in terms of having communications outside of emails?
We are set up with, Skype for Business.
Yep.
But it's not widely used.
Yes.
It seems like its main purpose is to try and get the attention of someone who's working with the headphones on, as opposed to truly be a communication tool.
Yeah, right. Fair enough. Okay, excellent. Well, as you know, I'm keen to delve into a specific topic today, and we've had a bit of a chat, and I know you're doing a lot around content strategies. So I'm excited to hear a bit more around your approach to content and something new that you've been trying in the last kind of couple of months.
Well, yes. Well, we've been running this interesting initiative, which I sort of touched on at the presentations I've made with Interactive Minds. And it was all around the sort of needs-based content. So the rationale was instead of just trying to sell product, so typically in the home loan space is where we started.
Yes.
The main value proposition being you can get a home loan and get a whole stack of velocity points with it. That's great if you want a home loan, but having been a first-time home buyer myself not so long ago, I realized there was a big opportunity to really help out people at the stage where they're starting to consider buying a home, and what do they need to know, and what do they need to know about their finances, and how to shop around for property, and things that I felt I had to do a lot of research on, thought could be useful to be provided by Virgin Money by producing this needs-based content. That served a purpose higher up in the funnel.
Yes.
And so, around 6 months ago, we basically produced this content and published it on the website.
Yep.
With 6 specific needs that were identified. So we had first-time home buyer, an investor. If you're building your home, if you're upsizing, downsizing, or if you're renovating.
Right.
And basically providing a number of blogs and useful resources to help out depending on where you're at in your journey.
Yeah.
So we rolled that out 6 months ago, and we had to sort of let it run, get some exposure and to see how useful it was.
Excellent.
I'm sure you have some questions about
it. Well, tell me more about this content. So you identified these specific needs, or I guess customer uses almost. How much content were you creating for each of those?
I guess across the board, we probably had an average, I'm going to say, of around maybe 5 blogs per need.
Yes.
On top of a primary, need hub page, which would centralize how to get to, navigational page.
Yeah.
That could get you to those specific blogs.
Excellent.
And the expected journey was that we would get people from finding the blogs by being either amplified through social media or through email programs or just simply through search.
Yep.
That they have a good experience and that each blog had what we call the next best action.
Excellent.
Or NBA, as we like to call them, which basically led them to what would be the next logical read or tool that could be useful to them.
Great.
And the idea is to nudge them down that journey.
Excellent. And were you also trying to acquire their details at any step of this process, or was it all kind of free content that they didn't have to engage in that to that level?
So the KPI for home loans is to basically collect a lead for someone who's interested in hearing about our home loan.
Yeah.
But the content itself, its KPI was actually an interesting one to measure because it's basically trying to put value against, awareness and consideration type content. So the way we'd approach this is we basically ran, what we can call an attribution model against content.
Yes.
Where we basically look at out of a total number of leads generated for home loans, how many of them were exposed to needs-based content.
Awesome.
That obviously didn't exist before we launched.
Yeah.
And so typically we were able to extract a percentage of people who were exposed, which was much larger than I thought. And then the next step after that is to basically then look at those who were exposed to this content, their propensity to become a lead.
Yes. And
is it higher or not compared to those who haven't? Which we found to be a quite useful way to actually measure the success of the program, although it does need a little bit of tinkering around with your analytics tool of choice.
Yes, yes. And I imagine once you were getting people to those pages that you were then remarketing to them at relevant times around your home loan products?
Yes, correct. So one of the great objectives that we were able to set off the back of this program was that if you know that someone read a piece of content that is relevant for a first-time home buyer, you can basically put them into a segment which you'll consider first-time home buyer.
Yes.
And you can then nurture that person in the worlds of Facebook, for example, or social platforms or any audiences that you see fit to basically just, tailor your messaging to align to the fact that you know that they're likely to be a first home buyer.
Yeah.
It's probably not perfect, but it's much better in terms of the experience compared to just going, we have a home loan, buy now.
Yeah, that's right. And did you have to do any research before you created this content, or was it stuff that you were able to use kind of subject matter experts perhaps within your organization or external contractors to create?
So the process in creating this, so there was we had to basically build out a structure of content or a framework, which is something that we did internally. So I would have run this primarily with getting the help, I guess, of our SEO agency.
Yep.
And the idea was to sort of map essentially common sense topics that customers may be asking or prospects are asking, and mapping that against what people are searching in Google.
Yes.
And to basically create a bit of a matrix of how that would look in the context of web content.
Awesome.
That would be both relevant and useful.
Yeah.
And was written by an external copywriter.
Okay, excellent. And look, I mean, it seems like, this is a fairly obvious, maybe perhaps way to go these days, because obviously content is playing such an increased role for organizations. But I imagine in your space, one of the key considerations is how do you stand out? What approach did you take to try and make sure that you could get some traction with this content?
Well, because Virgin Money has values and I guess a purpose, some of them will be aligned to sort of keeping things beautifully simple, for example.
Yep.
And typically in the world of beautifully simple, I know that finance jargon or understanding how home loan works or understanding how to plan your finances in the context of buying a home can be a bit daunting. And so it was part of the briefing process with the copywriter was at the time when we were going down the lines of we need a piece of content that explains what LVR is.
Yes.
Well, you can say it in a very sort of Wikipedia tone like. You can go into a very technical way of explaining it, or you can explain in a way that will actually make sense to the end customer without needing to go into the details. And so that beautifully simple is probably something that we were able to bring to the table, which we were struggling to find on other platforms. And it kind of showed, if we look at sort of time on page or bounce rates across the content that we were able to publish, on average compared to other blogs, it did an outstanding job when it came to basically how long it took for them to go through the content and the time they spent on it. And I think the bounce rates were 20% lower what we saw on average on bloggers generally. So
great.
It definitely did make a difference.
Yeah.
And I think that really helps. The other thing was it was obviously made relevant to what people are searching for.
Yes.
But also making sure that we understood the intent behind the search term, which is something that is underestimated sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned that you got traffic to these content pieces via search, as well as some paid advertising across Facebook and other channels, and your email as well, I should mention. Do you know roughly what kind of split across that traffic, or what channel provided any percentages of your audience for these articles?
Yeah, so we ran some small social campaigns in probably the early days, but the core traffic that came to this content was actually coming through search. With the primary two being organic search, I think representing something like 45% of it.
Excellent.
Another 15 would have been coming through from the paid search channel, which made it the majority. And then the rest would have been coming from essentially other channels.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. And were there any surprises in terms of how this content was received or accessed?
No surprise in how it was accessed. It was interesting to get a better perspective as to what kind of audiences we were getting interest for. So typically, because we had a better view as to whether we were more inclined in getting first-time home buyers or investors or refinancers, for example, it was an insight we didn't necessarily have before.
Yes.
And because we could tie them up to a segment and then go, well, this lead came through first-time home buyer or investor, it gave us a good perspective, which also then helped with our paid search strategy when it came to where we focused our keyword optimization. So, so we basically were able to focus on the likes of first-time home buyers or refinance, for example, off the back of the learnings.
Yeah, great. And when you set out to start this project, what kind of expectations did you have around your outcomes?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
When you set out to start this project, what kind of expectations did you have around your outcomes?
Yes, the expectations, one of them was that we would be able to get more organic traffic.
Yep.
Not just from the actual keywords we were targeting, but also to augment our overall reach and click-through rates across the Virgin Money website. We also expected that we'd be able to reach a broader audience by having that increased, reach in keywords, which meant more people would be aware of Virgin Money. Typically, we are well known for credit cards.
Yes.
We are not well known at all when it comes to every single other product we do. So getting the eyeballs in front of what is value-add content that then talks about the fact we do a home loan was very high up in terms of what we were expecting to get out of this program. And Excellent. It hasn't disappointed.
Great. Now, you mentioned attribution played a big role in measuring the results. Can you share a little bit more around what you actually achieved through this campaign so far? I know it's been about 6 months since it got up online. So, what have you seen so far?
Yeah, so what we saw is that out of, say, 100 leads that were collected in terms of interest for home loans, we saw that 14% of those had been exposed to needs-based content. So the needs-based content played a role in them becoming a lead.
Great.
And that off the back, and for that particular audience, out of those 14%, we did see that the propensity to become a lead was indeed higher.
Excellent. And were you happy with those results?
Well, yes. We're obviously able to sort of present that back as part of our end of financial year, as part of, a post-implementation review, as we like to call them.
Yep.
And I think it not only, justified itself from an ROI perspective when it came to the development and the running of this program, but it also confirmed to the other products that it is an initiative well worth doing. And typically, we already have other products who are currently developing a similar program for them.
Excellent. Yes, that was my next question, whether it will be rolled out across other products in the company.
Well, typically, yeah. So we've almost finished producing content or needs-based content for the superannuation product.
Excellent.
And then we'll be able to then roll out the next cab off the rank, which will probably be in the insurance space.
Yeah, and I guess the beauty of this type of content is that it's not something that continually needs refreshing. Is this a program that you'll continue running? And if so, what kind of updates do you see needing to make to the content, if any?
So part of this process, yes, was to basically identify what we'd consider evergreen content, and then ones that provided value by providing up-to-date stats, numbers, or links to relevant sort of government tools or things like that. And as part of that, we basically have a list of content that we would what we call recycle every 12 months.
Excellent. Yeah, that's not too intensive, is it?
Keep the content fresh.
Yeah, excellent. And I suppose this plays just a piece in the puzzle of your digital marketing strategy as a whole then.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations for anyone else who might want to try a similar approach of using that needs-based content to engage higher up in the funnel?
I guess the most important recommendation in order to do it well is that it's one thing to obviously look at what are people searching for and to create content that is relevant to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really important to consider the intent behind the keyword.
Yes.
In order to actually provide actual value add as opposed to provide a well-optimized SEO page.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that SEO is a really big component for you and something where you have a specialty in as well. I know when you spoke at Interactive Minds, that was definitely a big focus around that. Is there any examples you're able to give us around that intent and how you can kind of get it right or not get it right?
I like to just apply a bit of common sense and to also basically search for that particular keyword and see what comes up.
Yeah.
And see what is considered a good experience or a bad experience. And I guess learn from what you consider to be a good one. If you put yourself in the search shoes and you're typing that keyword, what is it that you're looking for? So if it's trying to identify or understanding the difference between buying an apartment or a house, do you want to read a piece of content that will say, if you need a home loan for a house, this is where you go, and if you need a home loan for an apartment, then this is where you go, and it happens to be relevant, it's probably not a good experience.
Yeah.
Whereas you can obviously provide an answer to that question, add value to the customer, provide a great brand experience, and expect them to be aware that your brand exists in that space, which they weren't before.
Yes.
And it will increase their probability to either come back if they leave, but to also potentially navigate to more content and grow their level of engagement with your brand.
Yeah, definitely. Were you seeing that the people who were engaging with your content were engaging with multiple articles over a period of time, or what kind of repeat usage were you finding from the people involved?
Yeah, so the journey generally seems to be, I guess more than half the people will actually consume the content, spend, I can't remember the exact figure in terms of number of seconds or minutes they were spending on the pages, but enough to basically go through the content.
Yep.
Over half of them would leave. So we use the Adobe solution, which basically creates a first-party cookie on the website,
yes,
which then can stick for 365 days. We set a window of 90 days, and then we're able to look at that same visitor over the course of 90 days. Those who obviously came back and became a lead did so within that time frame.
Okay, great.
That was the way we measured it, yeah.
Yeah, and is 90 days, do you think, is that your cycles that you work on, or is that basically a bit of an experiment? Do you expect that you'll get some more traction for people who maybe take a bit longer than that?
Well, it's an interesting one where we know that typically a home loan journey to purchase is going to be much longer than, say, a car insurance one.
Yes.
There is a bit of sort of an assumption that if they're looking and reading up on something, say, a first-time home buyer, that in the next 3 months they will have at some point either spoken to a broker or been able to sort of do a bit of research on what are some of the good home loans out there.
Yeah.
If they haven't done so, then obviously, yes, we won't be able to track it, but it's good to sort of set ourselves a limit.
Yes.
I guess the customer experience research will tell us that generally 3 months is an acceptable time frame to be looking at. I certainly would not be using the same one for the likes of travel insurance or car insurance, as I mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. Just to come back to something that you said earlier, you talked about your NBAs, or your next best action from each piece of content. I think this is really important and definitely something where I see a bit of a gap in terms of content that's out around on the web. Are you able to give us a few examples of what an NBA might have been from some of your content?
Yes, absolutely. The whole rationale behind the NBA was that if you're reading something that is going to add value, the last thing you want to do is to basically have in the header a apply now button.
Yep.
It's a bit like sort of going on a first date and asking for the person to marry you at that point in time. It's a bit overkill.
Yeah.
So you want to take some baby steps, and that's where the NBA came from.
Excellent.
So from an example perspective, if you are hitting an article where you're trying to figure out what does LVR stand for,
yep.
You will obviously get the answer to the LVR, and hopefully the article will give you a good indication as to what that means from a home loans rate perspective, whether you're basically 80 or less, or 80 and more, or 90 and more, essentially.
Yeah.
The next best action here is obviously not apply now for a home loan, because you're basically just figuring out what that actually meant.
Yeah.
But what you might find interesting is, well, how much do you need in order to be able to apply for a loan? And that will be your next best action. Because then that will then give you the breakdown of, well, you've saved enough for deposit, but that money you've saved also needs to pay for stamp duty. It also needs to pay for the cost of the conveyancer. It also needs to, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so you're basically taking them into the next step of the journey, where they're starting to think about the financials and to go, based on what I've got, 10% of that needs to go into the deposit for the home loan, which actually only gives me X to buy a property.
Yes.
And so they're starting to get a bit more educated on this.
Yeah.
And then the next step could be a calculator.
Yes.
Once you're on that. So it's really thinking about a customer journey as opposed to an outcome, which has to be, they need to become a lead.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing this. I think it's really interesting, and it's something that, there's still a lot of opportunity out there, despite there being a lot of content around. Obviously, you're demonstrating that you can get the cut through and have the influence on, in this case, your application levels based on the content that you're creating. So thank you so much for sharing. It's been really great to have you on the show. And I appreciate your time. Now, if people want to catch up with you or connect with you after this, what's the best way for them to do so?
Well, I certainly have presence on LinkedIn, so I'm more than happy to receive a connection request.
Excellent.
That sort of mentions that you've heard of what we do, and you're interested in hearing more as part of, the invitation.
Fantastic.
That's probably the simplest way, yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks again, Chris. It's been great to have you on the show.
Cool. Well, no, thanks, Louisa. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it if you can leave us a review. My recommended action item from today's show is to look at your content and check that every piece has a next best action tied to it. Don't forget to check out the Interactive Minds Facebook group, where the marketing industry connects and shares learnings and opportunities. You can access today's show notes at interactiveminds.com/podcast. See you next week.